Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Curt Schilling Baseball Show, episode 56. Got a really, really cool gig going here. Got a former teammate of mine you're going to meet shortly who was, well, all kinds of special, and you'll understand why. But I wanted to talk about it quickly before this interview about a story that popped up over the weekend. George Kirby is a pitcher for the Seattle Mariners. And they lost the game 7-4 the other day to Tampa. And after the game, I'm going to have to tread on this lightly a little bit. Understand the context with which I'm coming at this. As someone who did the job that he's doing, he's done for less than a year. I did for 20. In addition to that, spent my whole life on the baseball field from the time I was five, like a lot of professional baseball players. But unlike a lot of them, I was consumed by the game. I never looked at pitching as a job. I looked at it as like a craft, an art, and I studied the best, got around the best, talked to the best. Then went outside the game and looked and fought to talk to the best and get FaceTime with people that were great at stuff, and always wanted to know what made great people tick, no matter what they did. That being said, I'm just going to read the quote and then I'll go from there. So he comes out of the game, and he says, I don't even know how to set this up, so I'm just going to say it. The quote is, "I wish I wasn't out there for the seventh, to be honest," Kirby said. "I was at 90 pitches after 6 innings, which is 15 pitches an inning, which is normal. And I didn't think I needed to go anymore." So, Bill, you and I have talked, and John, you know how I feel about this, but you and I have talked before this about, you asked some, I think, legitimate questions from a fan's perspective about different angles to go at this. And there really isn't any different angles. So my dad told me when I was young that, there are times and moments in life when you can see inside a person, to a makeup, to something they say or something they do, when no one's watching and when everyone's watching. I don't know how he said this, first off. And let's be clear about a couple things. This isn't the first time that thought's ever passed through his mind. And this is a guy who was looking to blame anybody but his performance. And, he came out and said, that wasn't me. I made a mistake, and all the things that go with that. Well, a mistake is and I said this to you, Bill, a mistake is me calling you George, Bill. That's a mistake. This is a peek in to what this guy's made of. I don't ever and I'm not, because here's the response from a guy who has the makeup you want in a pitcher. Yeah, you know what? I got tired in the 7th. And I didn't get the job done. And, it's on me. I should have said something after the 6th. I was gassed. I thought I could give him another one, but I just didn't have in the tank to get it done. That's the comment. I wish I wasn't out there for the 7th, to be honest. I was at 90 pitches. The hardest part of this quote, and I didn't think I needed to go anymore. Now, there are so many things wrong with the last part of that quote, but part of that is not his fault. Because this kid, let's see, in his career, going back to college, his highest innings total was this year. Last year, he had 130 innings. He had never pitched more than 90 innings in a year, going all the way back to 2018 when he was at Elon College. 90, 13 in minor league baseball, he threw 13 innings, 88 the next year with 23 in low A ball, 67, 80, 41. I mean, so, and as a starter, almost every start, he's made 1 relief appearance in the minor leagues, 10 in college. So he's been a starter his whole life. he's a starter with a mentality. I don't even know what the mentality is. I mean, I really don't. You know, he's got one career complete game in 115 career starts. So maybe he does think his job is to get 6 innings out worth outs. I've never seen anybody coach that way. I know it. Part of the thing now is, you know, I guess get a 6 or whatever it is. It's hard for me to wrap my head around this because there's so many things that and this is not anything I wouldn't say to his face. I mean, it's not it's not personal. And again, I'm critiquing a Major League Baseball player. So I'm critiquing a guy who's probably better at baseball than most of you were at anything ever in your lives. And that's not condescending. That's just, he's the part of the 1/2 of 1% in the world who's earned the right to play. And he has earned the right to play in the big leagues.
The one thing you said to me, Curt, that really rung true to me was basically what he was saying with that quote was, here, let's give the ball to somebody else because they're going to be better than me.
Yeah, I never came out of a game in my life where I thought the guy coming in behind me was going to be better than I was. And there are, again, so many things. I mean, this kid, first off, let's be clear, he's a strike throwing machine. In the last 2 years, he's thrown 295 and 2/3 innings. He's punched out 284 guys and walked 38. That's like potential ace kind of stuff. But you're looking at 6 innings to start. And I guess that's what they're after, I guess. Or what let me go back and make sure I'm saying it verbatim. I wish that I wasn't out there for the 7th, to be honest, and I didn't think I needed to go anymore. I don't. And for anybody that wants to be upset with me for critiquing, the fact of the matter is I can't fathom being anywhere near a comment like this in any capacity mentally. And, you know, I wrote you Bill, I wrote you an email earlier and I you know what, I'm just going to read off of this. In the sense, you know, I wrote, Bill and John and I were talking before the show, and Bill had asked me about, you know, how my take, and I said, here's what I wanted. Here's what I know, and people that have never done it don't. That's not a mistake. A mistake is me calling you Bob. You don't say things of that magnitude off the cuff. No one does. That's not the first time that thought has ever popped into his head. I promise. That's a character trait. It's harsh, I guess, but that's what it is. Think about this. Have you ever been in a situation in your life where you said, bah, I'm getting beat, not my fault, and never thought to say that out loud? Only weak-minded people think like that, and I mean weak-minded in an athletic sense. I can't get into the head of someone living a normal life. I've never been normal from a mental approach. And I tell a story about Joe Madden, the manager. I met Joe when I was 16, and he used to run a camp in Arizona. I used to go it was over the Christmas break, and that's where I spent my Christmas break at Joe Madden's baseball camp. And when I was 17, I think, there's about 400 kids from all over the country. And the whole thing was run by major league scouts and coaches. And Joe said one time early, and I went to like four years in a row. And Joe said, you know, based on the percentages, guys, you know, only one of you guys is probably ever even going to get a shot in the big leagues. And I remember to this day, the second he said that, the first thought that went into my mind was, man, I feel bad for these 399 kids. I mean, what are they going to do? Like, I knew that was going to be me. And, you know, I don't know how that sounds, but that was always how I went at things. I was always going to be the exception. And I was going to work to make myself the exception. And most guys in the big leagues have done that. Fear of failure is as motivating a thing as anything in existence for great players. I mean, I drove all the great ones, and it was certainly drove me. I hated losing so much that I promised myself and swore myself I would do whatever I had to do to make sure it never happened again. And I lost 146 games, and I swore after every one of them that was it. And I was resolute about that. And you know, I just can't put my hands around this quote, because this is not something a big league pitcher with any talent and hard mental makeup says. You just, and again, I don't know this kid, and you know, I'm sure he's a great kid and a good teammate, but I could never coach him again into the 7th inning and be thinking to myself, you know, he's got the ball where he wants it, because now he's going to cut off his nose to spite his face. He's going to be in a situation now where he's not going to say anything if he's exhausted, because he doesn't want to look like he's weak-minded, and he ends up costing his team. Like I said, the comment after that game was one of two things. I didn't do my job. I got out-pitched, and I should have done better. Or, you know what? I was gassed after 6. I should have said something. And let me circle back. This is this kid's first full year in the big leagues. So he's young, and there's a lot of things to learn. But this comment and this quote wasn't a mistake. This kind of gives you a peek inside of the mental makeup of an extremely talented young man. And I really, really hope that he finds a way to address this internally. I mean, you know, your teammates are your teammates, and they're going to say and do. I mean, you owe them an apology. You owe your manager an apology as well, because you threw everybody under the bus but yourself.
And apparently he did apologize to Scott Service.
Right.
So.
Yeah, no. And you know, like I said, he's a young kid and all the things that go with that. But this is not a young kid comment, in the sense that he's a young man. He knew, and again, you know, it's like, and I'm not comparing him to steroid users, but you remember every time somebody got caught using steroids, my first thought was, well, okay, this is not the first time. Things like this, this is not the first time this kid's ever had this thought. And that every coach that he's ever had should be kicking themselves in the ass that they let him go through their franchise or their team and they didn't teach him better. That's on them. And baseball has fostered this kind of mentality too. And
speaking of mentality, the guy who's about to join us.
Yeah. So this is a guy, you guys are about to hear from. I promise you, never uttered anything close to a quote like this in his entire life about anything he ever did. I had the privilege of being his teammate for a couple of years in Boston. He was one of the absolute cornerstones of that 2004 86-year drought-ending run we had. He pitched some enormous innings. He was the 5th man in the rotation, but he wasn't anything but a 5th man. Went on to have a phenomenal career, a long career, and you're going to hear about what he's up to now, including his incredible music career. And you're going to, hopefully after this, you're going to go to YouTube and look at the video he references, because it's one of the most amazing things you'll ever see. Bronson Arroyo is going to join me here in a minute, and I want you guys to enjoy this for all it's worth and soak it in, because he's a good man. He was a great teammate, and he's having a lot of fun in life, and he earned every aspect and every bit of it. So have a listen to Bronson and Arroyo and I hanging out. Welcome to the show. Another former teammate of mine, a guy who I had the honor of playing with briefly in Boston. And it was briefly because he was such a nice guy and was so nice to the team that they took advantage of him. Right-hander Bronson Arroyo. B, hey, what's going on, big man?
Oh, man, just hanging out in Cincinnati.
Now, have you've been there since you retired, right? I mean, that's where you stayed, because you finished your career. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, playing 9 years here, it's nice to go down to the ballpark. I also married a hometown girl here, so you know, her family's here, but it's nice to go. As you know, you can't just walk into a locker room off the street after you played for a team for a couple of years. Like, you need to be there long enough to where, you know, the clubhouse guys and the front office still kind of respect you in a certain way. And I could still go into the clubhouse and plug in a guitar and play for the guys and eat their food, clean some shoes. So it's fun here.
Well, I want to mention a couple things. First off, I'm going to Bronson and I played together in 04 and 05 before he was traded, and I'll get into that. But I got a chance to play with him early in his career. He had been with the Pirates before coming over to Boston, and had bounced back and forth, Penn starting. It was a unique situation in my opinion, and from my perspective in this sense. Guys bounce back from the rotation and the bullpen generally because of performance. They're not good enough to be a starter, or they're not good enough to be the closer. This was the opposite. Bronson could throw I argue that when people talk about Nolan Ryan throwing his 200 pitch games, the only guy I ever played with that was like that was this guy. I never saw him ice his arm. which I can't begin to tell you what a freak thing that is in professional sports. But he took the ball every time it was handed to him. And I'll tell you, B, when we first got to know each other, my first impressions, first of all, you were just scrawny and skinny as hell. And I was like, oh my God, are you seriously going to try and put innings on this body? But the second one was, and both of them were horribly wrong, and I'm glad they were. The second one was, you were a lot like Scott Rowland to me. You were a guy who had a much bigger life than just the game. And I never did. I was consumed by the game, right? I always felt like, hey, listen, if you're not consumed by the game 24/7, you can't be as good as you want to be. I realized that ended up being, that's how I was. But there were other guys who could come to the park at 7:05, put the uniform on, do their job, be as good as they could be at their job. And at 10:05, they went home and they were something else. And I look back now and I'm envious of that, because teammates like you, and I had them, I was like, come on, man, you got to get more serious about the game. And it was actually the opposite. It was actually Curt probably should have been less serious because he would have enjoyed it more, because I watched what you brought to that team. And, you know, I talked to Johnny recently and I told him, you know, we had that idiot's moniker, so to speak, and we sure as hell looked apart. But people can't understand how close that group of people was. And, you know, we went on the road and you and Millar would bring your guitars and we would kick back in a hotel room. And that's what we did. You know, I always tell people playing baseball in big leagues is like going to college, being in a fraternity, getting paid millions of dollars and not having to go to class. Like, we just hung out, we drank beers and listened to music and did stuff. And I wanted to know from you, you were young at the time. You were 26 when you came to Boston, which is in the big leagues is young. Where did you see your role on the team in 03 and as it evolved into 04 and what did that mean to you?
You know, I'd been 8 years on a Pirate organization. And so, you know, I thought of myself at that time in the minor leagues, you know, I'm 40 games over 500, man. Like, Curt, you could respect this. Nobody really knows what 84 wins in the minor leagues is like, right? That's like unheard of. I've got 1,100 innings down there. And the Pirates really kind of didn't free me up. I pitched in the minor leagues just off the top of the head, you know, being creative as I was. But when I got to the big league level, they didn't let me shake off Jason Kendall for a few years, and it was very difficult to pitch that way. So when I got over to Boston, I had a great year in AAA in 03. I didn't really expect to get called to the big leagues because the team was so good in 03, but a couple of guys got hurt. I threw a perfect game. They were getting a lot of pressure from Japan to sign me. And so Theo finally called me up. And when I first got there, Grady Little basically said, hey, man, just go along for the ride, man, because I don't know how much you're going to pitch here. And next thing you know, I started pitching the back end of the games because everyone in the bullpen was struggling so bad.
Right.
I wound up making that playoff roster in 03. So by the time 04 came around, I felt like I wasn't sure what my role was going to be. I didn't know if it was going to be a swing guy or not, but I thought I had a chance for the fifth spot in the rotation. But as you know, Byung-Hyun Kim was there, and they'd gotten him from Arizona with you guys. And they thought of him as the guy who might be able to solidify that fifth spot in the rotation. And it only took 6 starts in you know, I think it was like in May for them to figure out that he wasn't the guy. And when they gave me the ball back, then I felt like, hey, I'm here to do a job at the big league level, to be a starting pitcher for a while, hopefully.
Right. Well, and that was the thing that I was wrong on every account. And the one I was most wrong on, I was so proud of you watching this happen is after you left. So we'll talk about the contract situation later, but you signed a very team-friendly deal to stay in Boston for all the reasons I think I did the same thing multiple times. I signed team-friendly deals in situations because I liked where I was. I liked the people I was. That was a dream situation for us. You made, you know, one of my favorite pictures is the picture of us in the hallway that I know you've seen it a million times. We made 59 starts of the 162 games that year. And people go to sleep on that. And every good team I was ever on, we did the same thing as starters. We all took the ball. And not only did you take the ball, but you came in relief in some situations that we'll also talk about. But I want to read these numbers off, guys. So you go to Cincinnati, and you have, to me, you probably your best season of your career in statistically in 06. You go 14-11, that's all good and well. Record is what it is. But you throw 240 innings. And you do so with the innings at the end being as good as the innings at the beginning, which is always the litmus test for me. How are you pitching in September? Because I don't give a crap if you give me 40 September innings if you got a 7 ERA. But then you run 210, 200, 220, 215, 199, 202, 202. You were a 200 inning guy. You won your game, 17 wins. You won 15 games, three or more times. And the St. Louis team wasn't a powerhouse by any stretch. And by the way, you were pitching in one of my least favorite ballparks on the planet, because a pop-up behind home plate could be a home run in that ballpark. But you became a stud, a horse. And you always had that belief, because I can remember, like I said, I can remember watching you thinking, okay, when does his body just split in half? Because you can't put that kind of a workload. But you had an approach to pitching. I want you to talk about your approach in the sense that you were a very unique breaking ball guy. You could throw your breaking ball 5, 6, 7 different speeds, but you had a baseball IQ in my mind that was off the charts. Where did were you always a baseball smart guy? And how did you get your feel for pitching?
It started early on. I can remember in that spring training of 2004, you talked about my body being so thin, you didn't think I could handle the pounding. And we had this one conversation there where I came to the ballpark, and I've told this a few times on the air. I came to the ballpark, and I had pitched against the Yankees the day before, 3 innings and 9 up, 9 down. I went out that night, and I've always had a thing with motion sickness. So had a few drinks that night, but drank a little too much, and I was kind of nauseous the next day. And I went inside to ride the bike, and I remember Chris Carenti sold me out to you. He told me that I wasn't feeling good. You came in and you chewed my ass pretty good. And you're basically saying, hey, man, you're giving this thing away to Byung-Hyun Kim. You got a chance to get the start in the rotation. And then at the end of it, you said, I don't think you can throw 230 innings with your body. And what people didn't know about me, what you didn't know about me at the time, was that I had been in the weight room since I was a 5-year-old kid with my father.
Yeah.
I have DVDs of me as an 8-year-old.
I saw that after. Yeah, I saw those things.
I'm 60 pounds in 1985. I'm 8 years old. I squat 255, 60 pounds. I'm skinny as a rail. And I deadlift 235 and bench 130. These are records that have not been broken to modern day. And so what happened was, in that weight room with my father, not only were you when you're pushing 250 pounds as an 8-year-old weighing 60 pounds, in order to gain 5 pounds over a 6-month period to max out again, it's about strategy. It's about how tight are your clothes. It's about what food are you eating? Are you carbo loading, right? So he turned my brain on for strategy early on in that weight room. And what that translated to on the baseball field was me really thinking about how to pitch, get guys to get off the barrel of the bat. And I never was really obsessed with the strikeout. Right. And the merging those two things together just made me kind of an outlier. I pitched outside the box. I didn't have an ego for strikeouts or velocity. The only thing I had an ego for was toeing the rubber every 5th day and giving you 200 innings. And so you blended that stuff together. And as I came along, I realized in the minor leagues that my 91 mile an hour fastball from high school couldn't dominate anybody anyway, even at the rookie league level. So the better hitters, you were going to need to find a different way to get the job done. And that started my brain on this wheel of kind of like, how do you get outs with less? Right. And people don't generally think about that.
Well, that's the Maddox approach, in a lot of ways. I don't care how you make an out. I just care that you make one. Right. And that ultimately, and I would argue, I'd not argue, but I would tell you, I think I cheated myself. I came up at the end of the old school era when, when you're a young player, you're seen and not heard and all the things that go with that. I think that, and I had some of that older school mentality, but I think it cheated me out of getting to know players and teammates like you in a different way. Because you're right. I learned more about you after we separated and why you were so good than I did when I was with you. Because I was always that, like I said, I came with that from the baseball perspective. You got to do baseball, this and that. And I come to realize now, especially after having kids, there's no one way to do anything. And anybody that tells you is a crappy coach. And you had a very unconventional way, but you had a feel for pitching. And that, to me, one of the things I think young guys these days fail to get is that minor league experience. I think I had 600 or 700 innings in the minor leagues. You had 1,100. I learned how to do all my things in the minor leagues. I had like 30 complete games in the minor leagues or some stupid number. I knew how to pitch in the 8th and 9th inning, and we learned how to pitch in the 8th and 9th inning, not in Fenway, but in Altoona, Pennsylvania, or someplace. And you brought that to the table. But again, the hard part in me seeing you as an equal, which you absolutely unequivocally were, was that I thought you had to be like me to be like me.
Yeah. I remember when you came in the locker room and we already knew the stories about you and Randy Johnson. Don't speak to them on the day they pitch. And I remember that lasted through spring training. And on that team, Millar was such a vocal guy pre-game and stuff that I felt like that. I don't know if you saw this in your mind, but I observed you in 2004 sitting down and playing cards with the guys the day you pitched later in the season. and you kind of softening just a little bit, realizing I can still be a good baseball player without having to be kind of like this really stern military guy all the time.
Yeah, and and I think the thing that I try to tell people is early in my career, I realized that there was a difference. I wasn't being paid to pitch. I was being paid to win. And that was always I had to be, and it's one of the things I look back on too. I had to be who I was and act the way I did to get what I got from myself. And you know, I would say that's exactly how you were. Because if you would have been a militant, strict guy, you would have been a different player, a different person. And you know, and that was, I think that was one of the shames of the old school kind of way was, you know, yes, as a rookie, you come in and you're quiet and all the things go with that. But I tried to, and I hope I did at times, take an approach of, hey, listen, if I can help you be better, here I am. And if I can help you do these things, here I am. And on the day I pitched, it was like, that was my day. That was the day I wanted everybody to treat that day differently. And I didn't, not by asking them, but by setting the tone and standards myself. And that became my day. And yeah, I mean, there definitely was, and I saw this, it's funny because I've had a couple reunions, and I saw Randy Johnson, who now is like this fan ambassador, fan-friendly, smiley guy, and it's like, and Mickey Morandini it's like, come on, dude, seriously? And it's like, yeah, he goes, I wish I would have enjoyed it more when I played. But
and I always had that perspective. You know, I was an easygoing guy by nature.
Yep.
Growing up, my father had a really vicious temper, but I just leaned a lot more towards my mother. I kind of had this easygoing personality. I could brush defeat off very easily. And, you know, I just felt like I needed to be a little bit more of a mixed bag. I didn't want to drag all the baggage from baseball. A guy like Tony La Russa, you hear him talk about how his day is going to be dictated by the wins and losses of the team. But, you know, when you go home at night, I mean, you know, Curt, you play for 20 years, man. Your wife doesn't want to hear about the team every single night, right? So it's like, you're trying to separate yourself. You're trying to compartmentalize your life in a lot of ways. And I was really serious about the game. It took some time for people to understand that just because I had cornrows in my hair and I was playing an acoustic guitar, that I was really serious about my off days, my workouts. I mean, I never missed any of that stuff. No. But they didn't know me as a kid. So they saw the external stuff. And I wanted to have a good time. I wanted to throw a team party that was quality. But even inside of throwing a team party, the details matter. And it's hard to throw a good team party. And people don't really realize that until after the fact. And then they go, oh, wow, man, like he used to make tapes for the rookies and pop them in on the bus. And we had a party in Arizona when we landed and everything was there, from poker tables to food and everything. You know, that stuff is not normal in the game. And as I got older, people started valuing who I was as a loosey guy, but also was very serious underneath the hood.
Yeah, I smiled every time I heard your name after we separated ways, because I so loved that you defied expectations, had such a phenomenal career, inducted into the Cincinnati Reds Hall of Fame, by the way, which is no small thing considering it's one of the oldest franchises in the sport and the legends that live in that. Talk to me about the music. When did that start, and how did you get as good as you were? I'm going to assume it's like you did everything else. It's like you practiced till your fingers bled, but how and why where did that start?
So growing up, my father was in bands in high school, and he was always singing around the house when I was a kid. On my mother's side, my grandmother was a music teacher in Key West, Florida for 70 years, a legendary music teacher.
Wow.
To where she taught at school, but also people were coming in the house and there was mini orchestras in the house all the time. There was always music around me. And I heard it all the time, but I never gravitated towards it until I'm a freshman in high school in 92. I hear Stone Temple Pilots, I hear Pearl Jam, I hear Alice in Chains. And there's something that was more serious about the music and the content that gave me goosebumps, right? In the weight room, I was listening to music with my father, but it was the Mamas and the Papas, the Beatles, Billy Joel. Right. And all that music was amazing. And it still is to this day, but it didn't give me goosebumps. And when I heard Lane Staley and I heard guys, you know, singing like Stone Temple Pilots, it made me think about music in a different way. And so I was in AA with Altoona Curve, and I saw an acoustic guitar from the clubhouse manager, and I picked it up and started strumming that notorious, you know, beginning of Nothing Else Matters by Metallica, where you can just do the four open strings, and you hear that song, and it just felt like, man, I really think I want to try to do this. And it was just, like you said, slowly hacking away at your house and in your basement and on a rooftop. playing song after song, just trying to figure it out. And I used to always just imagine, like, you know, there's going to be 7, 10 people in a bar sometime. They're going to listen to me play music. I don't know when and where.
Yeah.
And in the early years, it was a bit of a grind. But what I found in the later years, especially that first year in Boston, really 03 before you got there, and then into 04, it helped me connect with guys like Tim Wakefield, who were from the older generation and intended to be a little bit, you know, harsh on the young guys like myself. But if you could play the guitar and they wanted to play the guitar and you were a bit better than them, it opened up a line of communication. And then also, you know, when you finish a ball game, as you know, win, lose, or draw, you never slept when you went home at night, right? After you pitched. And it was hard to get to bed for most of us. And so I find myself in a city like Chicago, walking 2 blocks from the hotel, find some concrete stairwell where it echoes really good, and just sing for an hour and a half and getting that angst off your chest. Because singing is a real physical thing, not playing the guitar.
Right.
Actually singing at the top of your lungs some Pearl Jam, it is really, really physical. And so that for me was just a nice release. And it just felt like the flip side of the coin that could keep me balanced in the game.
Wow. That's a definite yin and yang, right? I mean, everybody has to find their pressure valve and pressure release. And, you know, because people don't understand, you know, you show up at the ballpark at 1 or 2 in the afternoon, which we did, and you don't get home till 1 or 2 in the morning. You don't go home and go to bed. You go home and you do something. And on the road, situations and teammates like you became invaluable because, you know, I always say Doug Mirabelli was so valuable to the team because he was the guy that could make you laugh on the bus in Customs in Toronto at 4 a.m. You know, you were that guy who was invaluable because at 11:50 in you know, Detroit, we could be sitting in a hotel room with 8 guys just shooting, having a beer, talking. It was the reason why those teams were the way they were, I argue, because we cared so much about each other and we were so close and we shared so many moments that weren't machismo tough guy moments. They were, hey, you know, quality of life moments. And your guitar brought that. And I remember, you know, Millar trying to be, you know, Johnny Cash and all the things that went with that. But every one of those memories is a fun one. I want to touch on your music career at the end of this because I want you to talk about it and plug it. I want to know all about it. But I want to go back to Boston and a situation. I've never forgotten this. And it resonated with me when it happened. Boston comes to you, or I don't know if you went to them. You clearly wanted to remain on that team, in that franchise, and in that city. They gave you a deal, and it was an incredibly team-friendly deal. It was very Wakefield-esque, I say, in the sense that, oh yeah, this is a no-brainer for us. Of course we're going to do this. And I thought that my understanding was they did it under the pretense of, I'm not going to give you a no trade, but hey, we won't trade you, kind of under their breath, which they tried to do with me, by the way. And I said, F no. But talk me through that contract dealing, what you were thinking with Theo going through it. And then you sign the deal and you're, you know, euphoric. And then I think one of the worst trades that, and nothing again. I loved Willie Moe, great guy, monstrous human being who could hit a ball untold numbers of feet. But the deal wasn't, I didn't think it was worth it when it happened, and it didn't end up being worth it. Talk to me about the deal, the signing, how you felt, and then kind of, in a sense, being betrayed.
Yeah, you know, so it started, you know, the year before was the first time that I had gotten to go to arbitration and went from making a league minimum, which was about 300,000, to I got like 1.8 million. And so we knew it was going to come a time there where, you know, maybe there was going to be a deal on the table. But Theo had left at the time. This is in the hiatus of.
I forgot about that.
Right, so Theo leaves in the gorilla suit, and there's this whole thing going on. And so, you know, they come to me, and at the time it was Jed Hoyer and it was Ben Sherrington, who were kind of tag teaming the job as young GMs. And so I had conversations with both of them. And I think this day it was Jed. I just remember him calling and offering, it was like 11.2 million with some incentives to get to 12. So it was basically, like you said, a Wakefield deal, 4 million a year. And you know, my agent obviously didn't want me to sign the deal. And they were just saying, look, you're the youngest guy on the staff. You're going to be the most valuable guy on the staff here soon if you can keep doing what you're doing. And you're basically signing yourself to be traded, setting yourself up. So I went to them, and I remember I was driving to Gainesville, Florida to play a little acoustic show for a buddy at a restaurant. And I was talking to Jed, and I said, listen, my exact words were, I'm not signing this deal because nobody else wants me to sign it except for me. I said, I'm not signing this deal to be traded to the Tampa Bay Rays for Julio Lugo before the season starts. And his exact words were, "We have no plans on trading you at all. We have not even thought about it. It's not on our radar at all." And so I signed the deal against everyone else's judgment, thinking, listen, I'm a skinny white kid from Brooksville, Florida. $11 million goes a long way. I'll get him on the next deal if I'm good, right? If I'm good, it doesn't matter. We'll get another one. And so I signed the deal. And part of that was I loved obviously the city. I loved playing under the stress of a playoff atmosphere every single night, even if it was a makeup game in an afternoon against the Orioles. Yeah. And you couldn't match that. Sitting up in the weight room, looking down on people on the street, walking into Fenway, knowing how expensive that is. And they're walking in thinking like, I'm going to see the Beatles reunited tonight. Like this is an experience I might not give my kids ever again. And I just loved everything about that. And so I signed the deal. And I'm in spring training. I remember I pitched that day. I had a great outing against the Orioles. We were underneath a tent out in Fort Myers, having a little lunch with some friends. And I'm chatting it up with, I had put that cover album out in 2005.
Right.
And a little part in the song Everlong that Stephen King, the writer, had wrote this part and did spoken word for me. And so Stephen King comes by that day, and we had never met in person, but we talked on the phone and we chatted it up a little bit. And then I leave the ballpark, and before I even get back to my house in Brooksville, because the next day was an off day, and I was kind of planning on what am I going to pack for Boston? I need some stuff.
Right.
And I get a call from Theo, and by then he was back. And when Theo called me, I was on the line with my buddy Reppard, and I thought, oh man, it was like a sinking feeling in my stomach, almost
you
like
knew.
I knew, and I picked up the phone, and he said to me, "I got something I don't really want to tell you." And I said, "You traded me to the Cincinnati Reds for Willie Mo Pena?" And he said, "Yes." And I was honestly, that's that feeling you get the first time there's a girl you really want in the world and she leaves you, like that feeling I haven't had many times in my life. And that was a moment that I was irritated, mad, just couldn't believe the betrayal. I just signed this undervalued deal. We've got an aging rotation, right? You were there. Yep. David Wells was there. Everybody was pushing like 40, late 30s at the time. And I thought, oh, I'm locked here. And it didn't work out. And it was a hard pill to swallow.
Well, I truly believe, my faith in God allows me to lean on the fact that everything happens for a reason. And I can't, going to Cincinnati, I don't know how you felt about it, but it turned out to be a monumentally good thing for you. You like I said, you went into the Reds Hall of Fame, which is, guys, please don't go to sleep on that. I know. But getting into a baseball team's Hall of Fame is an amazing accomplishment considering a player. But the Cincinnati Reds Hall of Fame is one of the legendary ones because they are one of the original franchises. They're 100 plus years old. Some of the greatest players ever lived walked through there and put that uniform on. And it's up until about 10 years ago, Cincinnati was the center of baseball. They opened every season with the first game on a Sunday and all that. And he had a phenomenal career. I want to move away from baseball, but I don't want to do it before I say this. 2,435 innings, multiple 200-inning seasons, won 14 or more games, 8 times, or 10 or more games 8 times, 14 or more 5 or 6 times. Had some phenomenal. It really was, Bronson. It's something I'm sure you're proud of it, but watching from the outside, I was so proud of how good you were and how consistent you were. Here's the other number I love to read off. Starting in 84, you've made 29 starts. In 05, you made 32. 35, 34, 34, 33, 33, 32, 32, 32. And then your final year in Arizona, you made 14 starts, but you took the ball every 5th day. And you took the ball every 5th day, and you gave your team innings. And not only that, they were quality innings. You were a top of the rotation guy in every sense of the word. And it was, I'm going to ask you about one Red Sox moment, only because I want to know what was on your mind at the very second it happened. I pitch in game 6. You come in after me in relief, and you're running over first base to cover the bag because you picked up the chopper that A-Rod hit, and he hits your hand. Everybody remembers. I remember the video of A-Rod on second base going like this, like, what? The video I remember is you standing there looking at your glove and looking at the umpire like, did that just happen? Right. And what was going through your mind and in that play and when that play happened?
Yeah, it was crazy. I threw him, I knew Alex obviously was a guy who everyone said had a hole in the inner half of the plate. You could beat him in, and he loved to hit the breaking ball, right? He almost had like a slider bat speed. And So I threw him a breaking ball, but I threw it like 68 instead of like
big sweeper.
Right, instead of like 75. And he caught it right off the end of the bat. It was spinning like a top. So my first thing was like, don't let this shoot out of your glove.
Right.
It's spinning so fast. So I kind of secured the ball thinking, okay, now I'm cool. I'm going to look up and Doug Mankiewicz is going to be on first base and he's standing right next to me. And so there's this moment of panic. Like, I'm not going to be able to make this out here. And it's such a huge situation late in the game. I look up and Alex is just jogging. So I had plenty of time. So I kind of relaxed. I was just there to tag him nice and easy, you know? And he hits my arm and my glove flew off. I didn't know where the ball went. I caught my glove on the back side of him. And I look and it's rolling down right field line, you know, and all, you know, chaos is ensuing. And Mankiewicz is looking at me. He's like, bro, are you okay, man? Because he hit your arm really hard. I was like, no, I'm fine. And then, like you said, you saw Alex pleading his case. And I've told a few people this. I was standing on second base and we were talking and Francona's out. And Orlando Cabrera's, he's doing this thing. He's going like this. You can see him on a documentary. He's looking at these guys and he's going like this and like this. And he's telling these three Greek guys next to the dugout that were giving him chat all day. He said, he was saying, don't cry. We're going to game 7. We're going to game 7. and so I'm standing on second base and we're kind of talking amongst ourselves there. And Alex, I'm watching him and I'm reading his lips and I'm kind of like laughing, like this is ridiculous that he's trying to actually pull this off. And he says to the umpires, you see, look at him. He's laughing because you got the call wrong. Yeah. To this day, I was like, wow, dude. I mean, he was like literally defending the indefensible.
Yeah.
But it was a crazy play, you know, and then after that, they start raining down stuff. Honestly, they called him out from the stands and with the riot crew coming out with the police. I mean, it felt like,
well, that was the 86-year moment, right? Like something always happens because Jeter came all the way around to score on that play. Right. And I remember it was the second time that the umpires got it right that day after the Bellhorn homer and Joe West was in that crew. And I remember them getting it right. And then after they got the call right, I'm thinking, okay, yeah, we might actually win this game.
Might be able to do this, right? And you got to remember in 2003, I'm warming up on the mound in game 7 when we get beat by Aaron Boone's home run. Yeah. So in 2004, it's the exact same feeling. You're in the stadium and it never felt like you had the ball in hand because we were up 5-1 in the 8th inning with Pedro on the mound. We thought we had it in 2003. So it was this constant thing, like waiting for the other shot.
I was telling that story about game 7, you know, after Johnny hits the grand slam and we're up like 8 or 9-2. I'm still waiting, thinking, okay, they're going to score 6 runs in one of these innings. Which inning is it going to be? Because, you know, and all right, so let's switch off of baseball. First of all, I want you to talk about what your music career brought to your baseball career, but I also I want you to tell people what you're doing right now, the band, and where you can be seen, and where obviously in this day and age you can find your music anywhere you can find music, I'm assuming. But where can people see you? Where can people get a load of the talent that you are off the field?
You know, most of the time I'm playing within a two-hour area of Cincinnati. You know, I've got kind of 2 things going on. One is I play in this cover band for the last 17 years around Cincinnati. We play everything from, you know, Pearl Jam and Nirvana to the Beatles and Tom Petty. We give you about a 2-hour show. It's about the sweet spot of music for a guy who played baseball, right? Because if you want to go out and try to grind around the country, you're constantly losing money. But to sleep in your own bed every night, you know, charge $3,500 to $5,000 for a band. The guys take a good little chunk of change home every night. We give you a good show. It's about as good as it's going to get, right? We're playing tomorrow night up at a fair here. So it's like there's a bunch of fairs, you know, 1,000, 1,500 people watching. It kind of works perfectly. I put this original record out in February with a whole nother band of guys that I met back when I was playing with you, 2004. They're all New England guys. They all play in big bands. Jamie Aronson is Miley Cyrus's guitar player. He was out with Matchbox 20 earlier this year. So that group of guys, I always said I was going to write an original record. And finally I did. We put it out last February. We played a couple of shows at Innings Festival with Eddie Vedder. And then we played the one in Tampa during spring training where Dave Matthews and the Imagine Dragons were headlining that. And so, you know, that was a beautiful thing. You can find that record. It's called Some Might Say. I wrote all those songs out of my mind in 2018 and 19. And you can find that on Spotify, you know, Apple Music, iTunes, anywhere you listen to your music. That's called Some Might Say.
Some Might Say. Okay.
The album cover's right here. It's white. Okay. That's a collage that my drummer did. So if you want to see me play normally, look on the Bronson Arroyo Band Facebook page. You'll find our shows on there. We usually play 15 to 20 times a year. You know, we'll play in Nashville in December for the during the hot stove.
Really?
Cheer.
All right, I'll have to go. All right.
Normally it's usually it's 2 or 3 hours, but we give you a great set of old songs that you've listened to and grown up with, and it's an enjoyable time.
It's a beautiful thing too. My 4 kids, every one of them, 3 of the 4, they still listen to the music I grew up with. Our generation of music was unmatched. 80s and 90s, going into the aughts. I don't think we'll ever have another period of music like we had then, and it's why I think that music still lives on. And I think why, cover band it used to be kind of the wedding singer kind of goofiness, but now you can make a living being a cover band because there's a lot of good old music. What are you doing right now? What are you? So let me ask you this: how hard is it, comparatively speaking, writing a song and pitching in baseball in big leagues? Right. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm asking?
Yeah, I would say writing is a whole different ballgame, but performing, the similarities between being on the mound and being on a stage, the nervousness, the pregame jitters are there for sure. You get those butterflies going, you're getting that adrenaline going early on in the day, you're trying to prepare in a certain way. The difference I would say is that when you're pitching, I was never I didn't care about what was going on in the crowd, right? Because
right.
For yourself, your teammates, and all of that. Musically, you have to care what's going on in the crowd because they paid a ticket to actually hear this music, right? And so you're not supposed to mess it up. That's the big difference. Is that
Are you watching the crowd and how it reacts and how they act when you're performing? Is it? Obviously, it's important to you, but are you watching that? Do you feed off of that, or does that dictate kind of your tempo?
Yeah, the energy, if you can get some energy from the crowd, for sure. But I'll say, I've played for like 13,000 people, and a lot of times I'm playing for 500. And the 500 I enjoy much more. You can see people's faces. You can feel the energy. It's more personable. When you start getting to a bigger stage and you're higher up above the people and you're looking down and they're, let's say, 20 yards from you and they're just kind of like a blob and the lights are in your eyes, it's not as fun. I don't feel the intimacy. So I enjoy the smaller shows, and you definitely can feed off the crowd. If the crowd will give you some energy, man, because it's not easy to sing Pearl Jam for 2 hours and Nirvana.
Well, it's not easy to sing for 2 minutes.
Right. I know it's hard to do that stuff. You've got to be in shape. And then not only, people don't understand the layers. Like, when you come from AAA, you get to the big leagues, just the way your uniform sits on you or how the mound is or the way the stadium feels could change everything about your comfort level. Well, musically, if you're playing around a campfire and you can put your head wherever you want and there's no microphone and you're sitting down, that's one thing. Now I want you to stand up and play the guitar, have to be a certain distance away from the microphone to perform, and now give people a show. Just don't stand there like Tom Petty. Like, let me see you jump around a little bit like Eddie Vedder and see if you can have any vocal left at the end of the show. And so there's these layers you're peeling back, and I'm still peeling them back, but it's nice to have something to grind on because after the game, sometimes guys don't have something to really lean into, and for me, the music has been that.
And I'm so happy that it is. I like I said, I've always very much valued our time together. I thought the world of you as a teammate, and I was so incredibly proud of everything you've achieved on and off the field. Because the first thing I'll tell people is you were a phenomenal teammate. You were a no maintenance teammate. I knew you would do your job. You were gonna take the ball. You could be relied on. And I didn't learn as much as I want to about you until after we retired, and that's all on me. But I couldn't be more proud of you, Bronson. So Some Might Say is the name of the album. Anywhere you buy your music, you can find it. The Bronson Arroyo Band Facebook page is where I'm sure they can find out what you're doing and what your latest gig is. You're going to be at the winter meetings in Nashville in December. So I'm gonna have to make. If you get a haircut, I might come out and
Hey,
but man, I really appreciate you taking the time. I really do. I know time is the most important commodity we have now, and I'm glad I got a chance to spend it with you. And I wish you nothing but the best, my friend.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it.
B, you take care of yourself, buddy. I promise you, after that interview, he never uttered the words, "I wish I wasn't out there." Thank you to Bronson for giving me the time. Anywhere you can find your podcast or look for your podcast, Apple, Spotify. We'd love you to go to OutKick.com. You can find it on the shows there, along with Dan Dockich and Tommy Lahren, Clay Travis, and a bunch of other people who do some amazing stuff. Hope you enjoyed the interview. I'll see you guys on Friday.